Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Stuff No One Told Us About Weight Loss. My name is Aaron and I'm here with Eloise, and today we are going to be talking about a little simple process that I learnt through doing my level 2 nutrition certification through Precision Nutrition, and it is the kitchen clean out project.
So this is actually something that we've done ourselves as well. We recently cleaned out our entire kitchen and pantry, and it's a really great process to go through to really sort of reset your kitchen space and make it a really great place to prepare food.
Yeah, so it was actually one of the projects or the assignments that I had to do while doing this study. So we actually did it ourselves. And you may have heard us talking about a previous concept, the elephant and the rider, in previous episodes. If you haven't already gone back and listened to episode number 1, I highly recommend that you do listen to that, because that analogy, that sort of metaphor, will really make it easy for you to understand this whole concept. But basically there's 3 parts to that. There was the elephant, the rider, which represents the conscious brain. There's the elephant, which represents your unconscious brain. And then there's the path, or what we like to refer to that is the external environment, is what's really shaping and making it easy for both the elephant and the rider. And that's the part we're sort of talking about in today's episode, is the path. And we're sort of shaping that path to make things a little bit easier for you to have success long term.
Yeah, and if you think about it in terms of an elephant and a rider, obviously if the elephant has a path to follow, the rider is going to need to direct the elephant less. And that is the idea of the path. And the same thing can be said for our external environment, especially when we're losing weight, is that if we set up our environment to help us along and make those habits easier for us to implement each day, we're going to be able to see success with a lot less effort.
Yeah.
And the kitchen clean out project is just one of those things that you can do to make it a little bit easier for you.
That's right. So in essence, this is a real big chance to set yourself up for success and really create the environment around you that's going to allow you to not only execute on a few days at a time, but be able to keep doing this over and over again. So if you listen to our previous episode where we spoke about how to create a stress-free dinner system, how to plan your meals ahead of time, shop for the things that you're going to need, this is really going to tie on the back of it in terms of, creating that bit of organization in your kitchen to make things just run seamlessly. Because if we're trying to put a system into a disorganized kitchen, and it's just not going to work, so you're going to be met with more resistance. So we really want to just clear the way so that it runs like clockwork and you're able to do this again and again.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like if you know that you've planned your meals out for the week, and then when you go to prepare things, you know exactly that your pantry is set up in a really neat and organized way, and you know that there's not old food sitting in your fridge, and you know that everything's organized in your fridge and it's all within the use by date and it's all edible.
That's right.
It's going to just make it that little tiny bit less stressful and much easier for you to then implement.
Yeah, and I think it takes away a bit of the stress too, because it's actually a fun process when you do it.
It is, yeah. It's a nice activity to do.
Yeah, and then obviously the end result to that is you're going to be left with a kitchen that's nice and clean and organized, and it feels good. You feel good that you've accomplished something, and you're more motivated to keep this system going, and therefore that's going to obviously help you stick to it for long term.
So step number 1 of the kitchen clean out is really basic. What you're going to do is you're going to go to the fridge, the pantry, or anywhere where there's food, and you're going to pull all the food out and start sorting it into 2 categories. So you're going to have your pile to throw out and your pile to keep. And so basically in the throw out pile, we've got food that is past its use by date, food that you don't want to eat or you don't like eating and is just sitting in your pantry.
Anything that's furry goes into this column.
Furry, or anything that's discolored or just has been in the fridge for way too long, or in the back of the pantry, things like, often we'll buy things for baking like flour and other grains and stuff. They actually do expire at some point. Yeah. And so check right in the back. There's all those places where they're hard to reach or that you don't really go often, and just get rid of it.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. Unless you do this quite often, or you've been doing this for some time, you're probably going to find a lot more than what you anticipate. When you do pull everything out and you go through those use by dates, I know it was, even for us, when we did this, going through a lot of the foods, there was a few things that had gone way past the use by date.
And we hadn't even been living in our apartment for that long at this point.
That's right.
But there was a lot, there was still a lot in the back of the pantry and the back of the fridge that we'd just forgotten about.
Yeah. So this could be a fun experiment for you if you're listening to this and you've had your kitchen set up for a few years. This will be quite a challenge. The other thing is with that, on the foods to keep, what you want to do is know the reasons why you're keeping it. So if you eat a food regularly or it's something that everyone in your household likes, that's enough reason to keep it. But if you're just keeping it out of a mindset of, oh, maybe we'll use this someday, or maybe it'll come in handy, chances are you're not going to use it, because if you were going to, you would have at this point.
Yeah.
And so step number 2 to that is, once you've gone through this first step and you've cleaned everything out and you've sorted it, is take a step back and look at what's lacking. You quite often will get an impression once everything's out in front of you and you go, oh, clearly from this, we're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. And that was the case for us. Once we took everything out of the fridge and, everywhere in the kitchen, we were like, well, hey, we're not
where
eating.
Where are the fruits? Okay.
That's right. So it was very clear to us that, all right, the next step for us is we've got to start including more vegetables in our food, so that can therefore influence the kind of recipes that you're going to be having and what you're sort of planning ahead of time.
It just gives you a little bit of perspective about where you're at right now. It's not from a place of judgment at all.
Yeah.
It's not looking at, oh, wow, I have so much junk food. That's not what it's about. It's just about, what do you want to be eating? Yeah. And are those foods there now? And if they're not, then you just put them on a list to, how can I maybe improve my food situation right now? What kind of foods do I want to be eating?
Yeah, that's right. And I feel, just on the back of what Eloise said, with making small improvements, it doesn't have to be some crazy jump to, an extreme measure and then only have a fridge full of vegetables, because that's not realistic.
Especially if you've got a family who eat a lot of different foods. It's
very easy to take this and run with it too far in the wrong direction. So what you want to do is just make really small improvements. They don't have to be huge. Like for us, it was, buying some carrots and beans that we were going to have with our fish, a couple of times a week.
Fruit for the fruit bowl as well.
That's
so
right.
that we would be more likely to snack on fruit versus snacking on whatever else we had. But an important thing to note there is that we didn't necessarily throw out the other things.
Yeah.
It was like, by adding fruits and vegetables into our kitchen, it just meant that we were eating more of those foods. It wasn't about eating less of other foods.
Yeah, it just gives you more options to choose from.
Yeah.
And so then once you have a bit of an idea of the improvements that you want to be making and the things that you might want to include, add those to your grocery list. All right, so that as soon as you go to the shops the next time, you know to buy these things.
So step number 3 is looking at, what do you have in your kitchen that makes food preparation and storage easier? So this could be things like actual appliances that help you cook your meals. If you want to make really super easy meals in winter, something like a slow cooker is, an essential tool that can really help make mealtime really simple. But also looking at, where do you store your food? Are your containers old and grungy?
Yeah, that's right.
Do we need to do a container upgrade? That kind of thing can really just make your whole kitchen experience completely turn around. If you've got containers that are not very nice to use, you're going to be much less likely to use them. If you've got a bunch of new containers, you're probably going to make it more likely that you will chop up all your fruits and vegetables and store them nicely, store your leftovers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And just on that, the other thing too is, especially with like knives and things like that, like if you've got really old knives and the handles are falling apart and they're really blunt, now's a good chance to upgrade them, sharpen them if you have to. There's nothing better than having a nice fresh set of tools that are, knives that are really sharp, that just cut through really easy, because it speeds up that time of preparation and just makes things that little bit easier. And what the whole process of why we're doing this is to make it a bit more seamless, for it to be a lot easier for you to do.
Yeah. And when you think about it, like investing in tools for your kitchen is essentially investing in tools for your health.
Yeah.
So it's never going to be a waste of money to buy new appliances, to buy new tools for the kitchen that you're actually going to use.
Yeah.
If you're going to use it and it's going to make you more likely to enjoy meal preparation, it's going to make you more likely to eat more fruits and vegetables because you can properly prepare and store them, then that's always going to be a win. It's always going to be worth the investment.
That's right. And there's a very key point Eloise said there is things that you're going to use.
Yeah.
There's
Don't buy all of the crazy gadgets that are like those late night advertisements on the TV that you're probably never going to use. Well, that's not what we're talking about.
Or you go to the home show and they've got some guy standing there like, oh, look at this cutlery set. It's going to do this, all these magical things. Like, that stuff sounds good, but are you going to use it? Probably not.
Invest in high quality basics.
Yeah.
Is what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the things that we restocked when we were going through this was just looking at things like getting proper mixing bowls, something that we didn't have. And so when it was coming to meal preparation time, it was just chaos and we weren't able to store things properly or mix things in a big enough bowl. And so it was just making it unpleasant. Proper chopping boards as well. Proper chopping boards, proper knives, as Aaron said.
That's right. And even just the really, really basic things like your baking paper, silver foil, Glad wrap, like those sorts of things. Like it sounds really simple and almost funny, but there's nothing worse than you want to store leftovers and you have no Glad wrap, to put it in the fridge, and therefore it's just, well, you could have a container, but but having those things on hand, again, it just makes the friction a lot less. It makes it easier to do. And then step number 4 is you're going to reorganize for success. So you really want to be setting up your kitchen in an organized way. So think about it, like your workspace or something where you're going to have to do something regularly. You don't want clutter in the way. You don't want things unorganized. You don't want to be having to look for certain things during doing that task.
Yeah, you want to know where everything is so you can just open it and just grab it and go.
Yeah. And so part of that is have things that you're going to be regularly using, and that includes like obviously different foods that you're going to be using in your meals. Have them in easy to grab locations. So don't put things that you're going to be using in the back of the fridge or the back of the pantry. You want it to be front and center, that it's really easy for you to get.
Yeah. And on that point as well, thinking about how do I want to eat and what foods do I want to eat more of, have those front and center in the fridge.
Yeah.
Have those sitting on the bench or in the front of the pantry. Because this was something actually that happened to us, is that we noticed that we had all the chocolates and sort of packaged foods sitting right at the front of the pantry. So as soon as we opened it, those were the easiest things to grab. And we didn't have fruit sitting out on the bench and that kind of thing. And so that wasn't our go-to. We were going to the thing that was easiest to grab, which was the chocolate. And now, again, we're not saying don't allow yourself to eat those foods. This is not about that. It's more about making it easier for you to make the choices that you want to make for yourself.
That's right.
So personally, I wanted to be snacking on more fruits. So just a simple shift of making fruit easier to grab just made it much easier for me to make that choice without even thinking about it.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, like when it is the end of the day and you might have had a long day, it's really stressful, willpower's down, what you really want to be doing then is relying on your environment that's already set up for success to help make decisions easier for you.
Yeah. So
you're not having to sit there and fight yourself on, as Eloise said, like going to the cupboard and just seeing like a wall of chocolates in front of you. That's going to be really tough. But if you've got like fruit that's readily available, you don't really have to sit and think about it too much. It's just that little one step that's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, it doesn't like solve your problems or anything, but it does make it that one step easier.
Yeah. So when we did this, we actually, really simple, went to Kmart and went into their kitchen storage area. Really,
really cheap but good quality stuff. Like as in a year later, we're still using it. It's all perfectly fine. Functions for its purpose. Wasn't very expensive.
Yeah. So we bought a whole bunch of containers and ones that make it really easy. So, for example, like our pantry is quite deep and it's kind of hard to get to. So they had little containers that had wheels on them.
And
they were quite
really long.
Yeah. So we can have like little drawers that we pull out and it makes it easier. And it sounds really simple, but those things, implementing them into our kitchen has made it a lot easier.
Yeah, so instead of having a pantry where you just chuck everything in, grouping the similar types of foods, so you're like cooking oils and salt and pepper and sprays, you have them in one spot together, and your herbs maybe. And then you have maybe your cereals in another section, and, you know, other tins of tuna and stuff are in another section, or your baking ingredients are in another section. So section it out, and then also, as Aaron said, grab those containers and really make those sections really clear. So you can just grab out, you know, your baking drawer, and you just grab that out, and then you've got everything ready to go.
Yeah.
So step number 5 is really looking at how are we going to maintain this system and what are we going to do moving forward. So it's great to clean out the kitchen one time, but it's going to build up again. You're going to find that there's foods that you haven't thrown out, or that maybe your organization turns into chaos as people chuck things in the pantry because they didn't know where to put it or something like that. So make sure that you then schedule in, okay, in a month's time, I'm going to go over the system. Is this system still working for me? What foods do I need to now throw out? What foods do I need to add? Like in every single month, just checking in.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a full-on clean out every month.
That's right.
The first one will always be the hardest.
That's exactly right. The first one's going to be the hardest, and after that it becomes a little bit easier. Like you're not having to, you know, go through with a big garbage bag and throw out half the kitchen. It's just little things along the way. But it means that the system doesn't break and it keeps working for you.
Yeah.
So what we're really trying to do, and what we speak about all the time with our clients and with ourselves and with the podcast, is trying to make everything as simple as possible, because simple means that you can follow it for a very long time. The more complex something is, the harder it's going to be to follow, and you're more likely to fall off the bandwagon.
We really want to find systems that are going to be with us for life. Systems that can improve our life for the better, rather than systems that are so complex that they just add stress and actually don't help us in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, we hope you got some value out of this episode. If you have a bit of an unorganized kitchen, or it's a little bit chaotic, I encourage you to try this method out for yourself.
Yeah.
Go through these 5 steps that we went through in the podcast, implement them, and you're going to find things are going to run a lot easier. It's going to run like a bit more of a system, and you're going to find it's going to be easier to maintain.
It's just one of those things that you can really do. It's almost like an act of self-care to make your kitchen space a really pleasant place to be, and make it really easy for you to make better decisions for yourself when it comes to meals.
That's right. And if you've got kids as well, like get them working in doing this as well. They'll love finding foods that are furry and parsley used by date. Make it a fun activity.
It's not a chore.
It's it's not meant to be something that's punishment. Just try and have fun with it.
Well, as I said, it's an act of self-care. It's something you're doing for yourself and for your family.
Yeah. So guys, thanks so much for listening, and we will both see you next time.